You're gonna see listings that have drastic price cuts and then other listings that don't have a price cut but have a large amount of credit you can use. Now, picking and choosing what makes the most sense, there's no real right or wrong answer, and this is why I always come back to building your big game plan. You see people that have 4%, 5%, and you're thinking, how did they get the rate that low when the interest rates are 7, 7.5, 8%? Well, they probably used the buy down. Now there's a permanent buy down and a temporary buy down. Permanent buy down just means that whatever closing costs you spent to get your rate lower, the rate is going to be lower for that period of time. So if your base rate, or you qualified for say 7%, and you paid extra closing costs and now your interest rate is 6.5%, you paid extra closing costs to buy down your rate from 7% to 6.5% for the life of your loan. The reason why some people don't want to spend a lot of their closing costs or a lot of their funds or a lot of their seller credit or lender credit on a permanent buy down is because if they believe that the interest rates will come down sometime within the next 30 years or sooner than later, right? You don't want to spend so much money to get the rate to 6.5. If you believe the rates are going to go down to 6% and you refinance at that time, just imagine if you spent money at 6.5% and 1 year goes by and the rates go down to 6%, if you refinance to 6%, any money you spent to get to 6.5% is basically wasted money. So now temporary buy downs are way more utilized nowadays because what it does is temporarily for either 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years at the beginning of your period, you're gonna get an interest rate that's either 1% lower, 2% lower, or 3% lower. So there's a 3-2-1 buy down, a 2-1 buy down, and a 1-0 buy down. Okay, so if you look at a 3-2-1 buy down, the first number is a 3, which means in year 1, your interest rate is 3% lower than what your note rate is, right? Whatever that base rate is, whatever that note rate is, it's 3% lower. If you look at the second number, there's a number 2 in there, right? That means for the second year, because it's the second number in that column, the second year, your rate is gonna be 2% lower. So if your note rate is 7%, imagine in the second year, your rate is gonna be 5%. And for the third column, you're gonna see there's a 1 in there. That means on the third year, your rate now is 1% lower than your note rate. So it goes from 7%, which is your note rate, to 6% for the third year. So looking at the big picture of a 3-2-1 buy down, you'd be at, if your note rate was 7%, you'd be at 4% for the first 12 months, 5% for the next 12 months, 6% for that third year, right, for 12 months. And then after that, you're fixed at whatever your note rate is. And in this example, it's 7%. If this is going above your head and you're like, what is a point? What is a buy? I don't even understand. Well, talk to your loan officer or reach out to me and we can start with the very, very basics. But I kind of wanted to skip ahead because there are a lot of people jumping back into the market because they're starting to hear of things like this that could actually get them a lower interest rate. Here's where building the game plan is going to be very important because we'll take a live, let's look at a live listing, okay? So let's look at a live listing. So if we look at 980 and we look at 7%, I know this example, I'm using the actual purchase price. You know, you're gonna have a down payment unless you're VA or unless you do some type of USDA loan, even though USDA, the price range is too big for this particular one. But for simplicity's sake, you know, I'm not gonna use a down payment example. I'm just gonna use just this mathematics of it. The principal and interest amount is $6,519.60. Now, $6,500 for $980,000, or for something like this that's been sitting on the market for over 120 days, they reduced the price by $10,000, which means the original list price was $990. Now, as long as the appraisal comes in at $990, you could basically say, why don't we offer $990 and let's use $10,000 in credit for a buy down account. Now, how does that affect you? Well, let's look at the numbers. If you plug in $990, right? $990 principal and interest on your note rate at 7% is $6,586.49. Now that's your payment at $990 for 30 years, okay? But you could actually use that $10,000 credit, right? Instead of reducing it to $980, keep it at $990 use $10,000 in credit and fund your buy down account, your temporary buy down account. Now, here's what it's gonna look like. On a 1-0 buy down account on a $990,000 loan, the note rate is 7% at 65.8649. The 1-0 buy down gets you to 6% for the first year. So the first year, your payment is $5,935.55. And the total cost for something like that, right, when you run the numbers at 990 on a 1-0, the total cost is $7,811. So total cost $7,811, which means if you had credit from the seller equal to $7,800, you could actually fund your temporary buy down account, because what it does is it pays the difference between your 7% note rate payment and your 6% temporary buy down payment. I hope that makes sense. When you look at the numbers, the reason why something like this is important is because imagine if you're trying to buy a home and it says that it's been on the market for 120 days and the price drop was $980. You might say, well, I'd rather have a $980 price and I'd rather pay $6,519 at a 7% note rate. Or, depending on what your goals are, you might say, I'd rather pay $990, give me that $10,000 credit, I'll use $7,811 to fund my 1-0 buy down account, and I'll use the rest just for, closing costs, help pay for my appraisal, things like that. The cool thing about temporary buy down accounts is if the rates drop in the future, right, you got to be used to your note rate first. So be used to whatever your note rate is, 7%. Temporary buy down accounts were created with the idea that as time goes on, yes, your payment adjusts towards your note rate, but so does your income. Your income should go up, or your finances should get better. That's the theory behind using a temporary buy down. But if you believe that the rates will go down in the future, whether it goes down to 6%, 5%, whatever it is, when you refinance, if you refinance before the funds in your temporary buy down account are gone, whatever's left in that account gets refunded back to you. Now, each lender is different. Some lenders will do a principal reduction, some will cut you a check. It really depends. So talk to your financial specialist just to see what options are available. When you find the place you like, if there is credit, then you compare what's better. What interest rate would you be satisfied with? And the reason why that's important is when you do get seller credit or lender credit, you can actually see how far you can permanently buy it down, buy the interest rate down. And guess what? If it matches what you want as an interest rate, say you can buy it down to 6.25%. And if that's what your target is, then do a permanent buy down. But if you believe the rates are going to be even lower than that, and you want the lowest initial rate, then do a temporary buy down, because that's the way you're going to get into that 4%, 5% interest rate range, and that might be what you're looking for. So even if you're not looking to buy right now, this is why talking to your realtor, talking to your loan officer, and just understanding what's possible is going to be super important, and it comes into play. Because imagine when you do jump in, and if things like this are available, you're not going to know which way you want to go. You're not going to know if you'd rather have a reduction in price or you'd rather have a temporary buy down account that could refund you some of that in the future if the rates drop and you refinance. Everybody's going to have a different strategy. It just depends on, did you build your big picture game plan and which works best for you and your family? Do I do a temporary buy down or do I do a permanent buy down? Do I want my interest rate to be a little bit lower for 30 years, or do I believe that the rates will actually go lower than that and let me do a temporary buy down so that when I refinance, I get a refund of some of that seller credit? Now, there is also lender credit that can be used for temporary buy downs. In fact, there's some lenders out there that are offering a 1-0 buy down in-house, which means ask your lender. Ask your loan officer, hey, do you guys do temporary buy downs? Can you help me get my rate lower? Can you explain the difference between a permanent buy down and a temporary buy down? Show me the difference, because the permanent might be better for me, or show me the difference. The temporary might be better for me. There's a lot to go over. A lot of information probably went over your head, and that's why you need to reach out to a professional, talk to your favorite loan officer, talk to your favorite realtor. And if you don't have one, as always I say, let me know, because I work with a handful of good ones and I can always point you in the right direction. Thank you.